Well, you mentioned earlier that you questioned if we're still a Georgia pod.
Mm-hmm.
It is for me, and I think that we haven't nearly taken as much credit as we should for winning a national title for Georgia.
You're
Because
right.
how many national titles did Georgia win before we were a Georgia pod? Like none in like a billion years. We become one, bam, national champions.
And we were on the way up, too. We
Mm-hmm.
bought into the Georgia pod with the hire of Todd Monken. Whether or not our reasons for becoming a Georgia pod have been fully realized is absolutely up for debate. But you make a great point, Tom. We are a part of the national championship rise for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, and as a member of what is still a Georgia pod, except for Bud, who clearly hates Stetson Bennett and always will, I'm going. I'm going over. I think it's push more likely than not because it's hard to go undefeated. But when I look at this schedule and I look at Georgia, I understand like they did lose a lot on defense, but the way that they've recruited in recent years, I really have no reason to believe that defense might not be historic in 2022 like it was last year, but it's still going to be one of the best ones in the country. And I look at the schedule and it's like, all right, I can see them tripping up somewhere, but I don't see them tripping up twice. So for me, I feel like 11-1 is the floor. 12-0 is also within the realm of possibility. And spoiler alert for like next, Wednesday's episode when we get to the West, I wouldn't be shocked if we get an SEC championship game between an undefeated Georgia and an undefeated Alabama.
I'll bet you on that. You want to bet on that?
Well, what kind of odds do I get?
Bud, set the odds.
All right, give me a second here. I'll actually. I know this Georgia stuff by heart, so I don't have to look. I'll set the odds while I talk. I'm going over on this, right? And one of the reasons why I'm going over on this is because I don't like betting these super high numbers if losing a quarterback might hurt. And as somebody who had the 10-1 ticket last year on Georgia, I really, really love how Stetson Bennett got it home. I don't actually think he's all that special. Can't totally rule out the idea that he might get better. I do think the offense will improve from last year. I really like their offensive line and some of their offensive line depth. I think they have NFL tackles at both spots and maybe one as a backup. These multiple tight end formations are going to be pretty interesting. And I think there's a lot of top 20 caliber teams in the East, but I'm not sure there's a clear top 10 caliber team in the East. So I do think Georgia could actually run the table even if it suffers a couple injuries. Now, look, they could also regress. It's certainly possible. They did lose a ton of talent. I have this at 11.3, so it's not like a strong bet for me, but I'm certainly not taking the under here with the Bulldogs.
I came in wanting to take the under. Like that was my hunch. I wanted to. Then you start looking at the schedule. They're going to be, what is it, 13, at least 13 point. They're 17 and a half favorites versus Oregon. I think they're going to be 13 point favorites in every game they play. I think it's an easy path to a dynasty for Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really is. It's pretty remarkable because they're probably going to be back in the SEC title game. They'll probably be back in the playoff. And like, how many challenges are on the schedule? So I think there is. So I think if it was 11 and a half, I would take the under on principle alone. And I think the stretch from October 29th to November 19th, where they have Florida in Jacksonville, Tennessee at home, at Mississippi State, and at Kentucky, I think that's where they slip up. Somewhere along that stretch is where they have a game. And if it was going to be, like, I would say either Tennessee or Mississippi State are the prime upset targets because I think those teams can score points on a defense by getting the ball out, going tempo like Tennessee is going to come at you, Mike Leach's system. I think those two teams could stress the defense and put some more pressure on the offense to have to score points, to have to open it up. So if I think they lose a game, but there's no way I'm going under 11.
Yeah.
So I'm on the over.
This is without a doubt a program that, like, it should not be a surprise that we're coming in and looking at this number. They've won the SEC East 4 times out of the last 5 years. They've had top 8 finishes in the final AP poll in each of the last 5 years. Since the breakthrough that was that 2017 season, they have only continued to recruit monsters and go out there and win double-digit games. It is unlikely that we will see a regression that is all the way to 10-2. I'm absolutely on the over as well here. I will say that I think that any hangover, like anytime you want to say like Georgia might have a hangover. We might see some kind of regression. We might see some setback. I feel like it would only be in December or January. Like it would only, like they're going to get to the SEC championship game. They will maybe, if not probably, be a contender for the college football playoff. And it's really only when Georgia has to go up against another team with elite talent that I think we're going to see anything that goes against the idea that this is, like you mentioned, Danny, an absolute dynasty under Kirby Smart.
If Kirby's building this dynasty, this Alabama East, he's already like he knocked the biggest hurdle yet, was getting the first one, and he was close early, then he got it. Now the challenge is maintaining that excellence over time. And that's one thing that Nick Saban never lets off the gas, never lets off the pressure, doesn't let them, be complacent for a second. We don't know how that's going to feel in Georgia. There's still a glow around Athens. They're feeling really good about themselves. How hungry are they? I think one thing is like guys like me and Bud who are like questioning Stetson Bennett. The more rat poison they can get, I think is good for them. And I think that's why Nick Saban looks for it. But everyone's picking them to make the playoffs. So I wonder how they handled the success. Do they come out as hungry week by week? That to me is kind of the next evolution of this Georgia program. And we don't know how it's going to, there haven't been many programs repeat over time. It was Nebraska and Alabama in the last 30 years, are the only ones to do it. So we'll see if they can become the third. But it's challenging to get young players to stay invested.
And another area, like we're all on the over, so we're all clearly high on Georgia, but a lot of the attention gets talked about with this team, like you're mentioning, Danny, like a championship hangover, then also like a defensive kind of just regression from being as good as it was. I don't think nearly enough attention is paid to how good the offense was last year, like because they don't have the top, first round, top 10 NFL quarterback pick there. But if you look at their numbers, like they were in the top 10 in just about a whole lot of important categories, like, just a success rate, EPA, explosive passing. They were in the top 10. But one thing where I think Stetson Bennett kind of comes and bites them, and one area that they struggled last year was in the red zone. They only scored touchdowns on 60% of their red zone trips, which ranked 68th nationally. It's the one area of that offense that really wasn't elite. And I think that's one of those things. If they face a defense that could get them in the red zone, that is strong enough to kind of make the windows tighter and kind of force Stetson Bennett to force balls into windows that maybe he doesn't have the arm to do. Because another aspect too is like we think of Stetson Bennett as being a weakness. They were actually, for a lot of more advanced kind of metrics, they were a better passing team than they were a rushing team. But some of that was just based on the defenses they were facing, defenses loading up to stop the run. But if you could stop them from running the ball in the red zone and force Stetson Bennett to have to beat you with his arm, that is how you beat Georgia.
How many teams can do that on the schedule?
On the schedule, I don't think Oregon. Yeah,
maybe.
I don't think Oregon can in week 1, but maybe towards the end of the year, Oregon would be at a team that would be like capable of doing that. But
Who's
other
the
than
best
that,
D-line they play?
Auburn, maybe.
It's probably Auburn.
Auburn, probably. I
South
think
Carolina could be decent up front.
Mississippi State could be decent up front. So Kentucky, but yeah, it's going to be Florida. Maybe it's like there's teams I don't know if there's any teams offensively that will be able to score enough, but like when they get to those games against other elite teams, that's the one area where I think that they are weaker than some of the opponents they're likely to face.